The Texas winter didn't often bring snow, but the cold could still crawl into a man's bones, especially on the open plains. Eli Carter felt it that morning, sharp and uninvited, as he rode along the rutted trail leading back to his ranch. His horse, Jasper, snorted in the wind, eager for warmth and hay. Eli had planned to make it home before sundown. He wasn't the sort of man who lingered anywhere longer than necessary, but fate has a habit of placing people where they re-needed. Up ahead, something broke the endless stretch of brown grass and frozen earth. At first, Eli thought it was just another abandoned wagon too common these days, with families heading west unprepared. But as he drew closer, he saw movement. A flicker. A human shape. His hand drifted toward the rifle at his saddle, not out of fear, just habit. Then he heard it. A child's cough. Weak, shallow, exhausted. Eli nudged Jasper forward. The wagon was tilted, one wheel splintered clean through. The canvas cover hung torn, flapping like a wounded bird. Beside it sat a woman and two small children wrapped in thin blankets. Their faces were pale, lips cracked, eyes too big for their cheeks. Hunger had carved its signature into them. The woman looked up as though lifting her head required effort she no longer owned. Strands of chestnut hair clung to her temples, and her clothes, once respectable, were now threadbare. Still, her posture held something dignified, protective. Eli dismounted slowly, hands visible. "Ma'am," he said gently, voice low, like speaking too loud might break her. "You need help?" For a moment, she didn't speak. The wind filled the silence. Then, barely louder than a breath, she whispered, "Please. We haven't eaten in 5 days." Eli felt that sentence like a blow. He'd known hunger once, as a boy after his father died. He remembered the ache, the desperation, the way the world blurred. No person, not a woman alone with children, should ever feel it. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out bread wrapped in cloth. The woman flinched, not from fear but disbelief. Her hands trembled as he offered it. Instead of taking the first bite, she broke off pieces for her children. They devoured it like starving animals, but she waited, watching them, making sure they had enough. That told Eli everything he needed to know about her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara," she said. "Clara Halle." Her voice cracked, but she tried to stand. He steadied her instinctively. She swayed, and he realized she was weaker than she let on. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. "Since the wheel gave out." 3 days ago. Her eyes glistened not from tears, but exhaustion. "We walked before that, miles, trying to reach the next town." Eli looked at the children, one girl, maybe 8, the other a boy barely 4. Too young to endure this. "Nearest town's 20 miles east," he said quietly. "You wouldn't have made it." Clara closed her eyes, accepting the truth she already knew. Eli could have ridden away. Some men would have claiming bad luck, trouble. Strangers weren't their concern. But Eli had buried a wife once. He knew the fragility of life. And he knew what mercy looked like, even if it came late. "You're coming with me," he said simply. "I've got food, warmth, a roof." Clara hesitated. Pride was a hard thing to swallow. "We don't want to burden." "You're not," he cut in. "You're surviving. That's all." For the first time, Clara's shoulders loosened, not in comfort, but relief so deep it hurt. Eli lifted the children onto Jasper, gathered what remained of their belongings, and helped Clara onto the horse as well. Then he walked beside them, leading the way toward his ranch, toward hope she didn't yet believe she deserved. Neither of them knew it yet, but this road wouldn't just save her life. It would change his. Eli Carter's ranch appeared on the horizon just as the sun began its slow descent, turning the sky into a wash of copper and fading rose. Clara watched it from Jasper's saddle, her tired body swaying with each step the horse took. She had prepared herself for anything, an old shack, a lean-to, a bunkhouse, but what she saw was Beautiful. Wide, fenced pastures stretched toward the hills, dotted with grazing cattle. A sturdy barn stood proudly beside a windmill creaking in the cold breeze. And at the ranch's heart sat a white two-story farmhouse, a home built with intention, care, and love. Smoke curled from its chimney, promising warmth. Clara felt her throat tighten. She didn't belong here. Eli led Jasper through the open gate and gently lifted her children down before helping Clara dismount. Her legs nearly gave out upon touching the ground. Embarrassed, she steadied herself, pretending she was fine, but Eli had already noticed. "You're exhausted," he said quietly. "Not judgment, just fact." Clara opened her mouth to apologize, but he gave her a reassuring nod, guiding the children toward the house. The front door creaked open at his push, revealing a dim but tidy interior, wooden floors, simple furniture, a stone hearth radiating heat. It smelled faintly of pine, leather, and something else Clara couldn't name. Solitude. "Sit by the fire," Eli said. "Warm up. I'll get food." Then, with a half-turn, "Shoes off near the rug, if you like." "Floor's cold." He disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Clara and the children alone with the crackling flames. The children pressed close to the hearth, hands extended, fascinated by both warmth and safety. Clara didn't join them. Instead, she looked around the room, absorbing small details, the dustless mantel, the polished table, the framed photograph on the wall. She walked toward it before she could stop herself. A young woman smiled back from behind the glass-light hair, soft eyes, standing in a wildflower field. Clara felt a pang in her chest. A wife, a life once shared. Her name was Anna. Eli's voice drifted from the doorway. Clara startled. She hadn't heard him return. He didn't sound angry, just resigned, like a man who had repeated the sentence too many times. She passed. 4 years ago. He set a tray on the table, soup, bread, and steaming tea. Clara opened her mouth to offer condolences, but Eli lifted a hand gently. No need. It was a long time ago. Clara nodded, though she could see it wasn't entirely true. The house spoke of her still empty spaces that were once full. The children didn't wait for permission to eat. They dove toward the bowls, slurping eagerly but not greedily. This time fear had given way to trust. Clara forced herself to sit. When she lifted the spoon, her hand trembled so badly she had to steady it with the other. Eli pretended not to notice. "You can stay here," he said after a moment, "for now. Until you're strong enough to decide your next step." Clara stared into her soup. "We've taken enough from you already." "You've taken nothing," he replied. "Food and shelter aren't charity, they're what any decent person offers." Clara wasn't used to decent anymore. She looked at her children, color already returning to their cheeks. Safety settling into their small shoulders. The ranch wasn't just shelter. It was a miracle she hadn't dared pray for. "Thank you," she whispered, meaning it with every battered piece of her soul. Eli gave a simple nod and stood, removing his hat like a gentleman unsure what to do with his hands. "I'll sleep in the bunkhouse tonight." "The three of you take the house." Clara blinked, stunned. "No, you shouldn't have to." "It's all right," he said softly. "A house built for a family shouldn't sit empty. Not when there's one who needs it." The truth of that sentence settled over Clara like a blanket, warm, terrifying, and undeserved. She watched Eli step outside into the falling night, leaving her children fed, safe, and asleep against her side. For the first time in months, Clara let herself breathe slow, real, living breath. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight, they were home. By morning, the ranch no longer felt like a stranger's property. It felt like a place where life might begin again. Clara woke beneath clean quilts, the fire reduced to soft embers. For a fleeting second, she forgot the months of struggle, the miles walked, the uncertainty. Then memory returned like always, and the weight settled on her chest. Her children, Lily and Thomas, were still sleeping, bellies full for the first time in days. Clara brushed a curl away from Lily's forehead and let herself watch them, really watch them. Without hunger twisting their faces, they looked like children again. Stepping carefully so she wouldn't wake them, she dressed and made her way downstairs. She expected silence, but instead found the smell of frying eggs and coffee. Eli stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, moving with the efficient ease of a man used to doing things himself. He looked up when she entered. "Morning." "Good morning," she murmured, suddenly conscious of her worn dress and tangled hair. "There's plenty," he said, nodding toward the stove. "Hope you don't mind simple food." Clara almost laughed. After weeks of stale crumbs and melted snow, anything felt like a feast. But instead of answering, she sat quietly at the table, fingers twisting together. Something inside her knew gratitude wasn't enough, not without truth. Eli didn't push, didn't question. He poured her coffee and set it in front of her, then continued cooking. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, just patient, like he was giving her space to find words. "They were going to take the children," Clara finally whispered. Eli paused mid-motion, the spatula hovering above the pan. He set it down slowly and turned to her. "Who?" she swallowed. "More mining company. My husband Samuel worked for them." The shaft collapsed. Her breath trembled. "They said it was negligence, said he caused the accident. And because of that, I owed them for the damage and the equipment." Eli's jaw tightened. "That's not how mining accidents work." "I know." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "But they had paperwork. Stamped, signed, official. They wanted payment I didn't have. When I begged for time, they suggested another way I could settle the debt." A sick understanding flickered across Eli's face. "So you left." "I ran," she corrected softly. "In the middle of the night. I took what little we owned, hitched the wagon, and prayed the wheel would hold long enough to get us out of the county." She exhaled shakily. "It didn't." Eli leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Not angry at her, angry for her. "And no one helped? Not a neighbor? Not the sheriff?" "The sheriff works for the company," Clara said. "Most men in town do. Samuel once said more mining didn't just own the land, they owned the people." Eli had seen greed before land grabbers, cattle thieves, railroad men with smooth words and sharp intentions. But this preying on a grieving mother, this was rot. "You should have been protected," he said, voice low. Clara looked down. "I wasn't, so I did the only thing a mother can do. I ran." For the first time since she'd arrived, Eli noticed the exhaustion beneath her strength. Clara wasn't just hungry, she was hunted. "So when I found you yesterday," he said slowly, "you weren't just lost. You were running from someone who intends to come looking." Clara nodded, shame creeping into her posture. "I didn't tell you because we've already taken so much. I thought if you knew, you'd turn us away." Eli straightened. "Clara, listen to me." His voice was calm, steady, unshakable. "You and those kids didn't do anything wrong. And no one, no company, no man is going to take you from here." Her lip trembled, not from fear, but from the shock of being defended. Before either could say more, the sound of small footsteps came from the stairs, Lily and Thomas rubbing their eyes, warm and sleepy. Clara reached for them automatically, but Lily climbed into Eli's lap without hesitation, trusting him the way starving children trust the first person who feeds them. Eli didn't move her off. He just placed a gentle hand over hers. It was then Clara realized something terrifying and comforting all at once. They weren't alone anymore. The days that followed arrived gently, slow, cautious, like a wounded animal learning not every hand intends harm. Clara had grown used to measuring time by hunger, fear, and distance. Now she measured it by warmth, warm meals, warm blankets, warm silences, and she hardly knew what to do with it. Eli's ranch woke with purpose each morning. Long before sunrise, Eli and his ranch hand Miguel were already tending the cattle, checking fences, and hauling feed. Clara would rise to the faint hum of their voices drifting through the kitchen window. She didn't want to be a guest on to stay long, so she found ways to help. The first morning, she swept the floors. The second, she washed dishes. By the third, she was outside splitting kindling with Eli's axe, breath puffing white into the brisk air. When Eli came around the corner and saw her, he nearly dropped the feed bucket. "You don't have to do that," he said, halfway between disbelief and concern. Clara wiped her forehead with the back of her sleeve. "I may not know much about ranching," she said, "but I know how to work." He studied her, a long, careful look, not to judge, but to understand. Then he handed her gloves. "If you're going to do it," he said, "might as well keep your hands." From then on, she helped where she could, chopping vegetables, mending shirts, sweeping the porch, hanging laundry, not because Eli expected it, because purpose felt good again. Lily and Thomas thrived quicker than she did. Within a week, Lily had memorized the names of all the barn cats, Button, Whiskey, and a feral gray Tom no one could touch but her. Thomas trailed Eli everywhere like a duckling, gripping the hem of his coat, asking endless questions. "Why do cows have 4 stomachs? Do horses get lonely? Is the sky bigger in Texas?" Each time, Eli answered with patience Clara hadn't seen in a long time, not weary politeness but genuine interest. Thomas soaked it up like sunlight. One afternoon, Clara watched from the porch as Eli lifted Thomas onto Jasper's saddle. The boy squealed with delight, tiny fingers tangled in the horse's mane. Lily clapped from the fence, boots swinging. Miguel leaned against the barn door, smiling. For the first time since Samuel's death, Clara wasn't bracing for disaster. She was witnessing joy. Later that evening, after the children fell asleep by the hearth, Clara stepped outside. The sky stretched wide and endless, pricked with stars so bright it looked like God had scattered diamonds across velvet. She hugged her arms around herself, not from cold, but from the startling realization that she wasn't afraid. Eli stood near the corral, leaning against the fence. She hadn't meant to interrupt, but he glanced over and nodded in welcome. "You're settling in," he said. Clara let out a breath she'd been holding for months. "I didn't think we ever would. You were running too hard to imagine stopping." She looked up at the sky again. "When Samuel died, I thought the worst part was losing him. But it was the world afterward, the people who looked at me like a burden, like a mistake." She swallowed. "I started believing them." Eli pushed his hat back slightly, revealing soft eyes. "You're not a burden, Clara. Neither are those kids. You're people who deserved better than what you got." She didn't know how to respond, not without crying, so she stared at the dirt, breathing steadily. "You know," Eli added, voice quieter, "this house hasn't sounded like a home in a long time. Not since Anna passed." Clara looked toward the lit windows, the silhouettes of her sleeping children, the fire flickering against the walls. "I hope we're not erasing her." "You're not." His voice was firm, certain. "You're adding to what she left behind. Some griefs never leave. Some simply make space for new life beside them." A breeze rustled through the pasture. Jasper pawed the earth. Somewhere far off, a coyote called. Clara turned to Eli, gratitude swelling so large it hurt. "Thank you for giving us a chance to breathe again." Eli didn't dismiss it, didn't brush it off the way men often do. He nodded once, slow and sincere. Everyone deserves a place to land. Clara realized then that she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to live. The peace didn't end suddenly. It unraveled in small, uneasy threads. At first, Clara barely noticed. Miguel returned from town quieter than usual. The mail wagon passed the ranch gate without waving. And Eli began scanning the horizon more often, his posture stiffening whenever hoofbeats echoed in the distance. Clara assumed it was rancher instinct weather, predators, cattle thieves. She didn't ask. Eli wasn't a man who worried out loud. but trouble has a way of announcing itself. Late one afternoon, Clara was hanging laundry behind the house, a basket at her feet, when she heard the steady clop of a horse approaching. It wasn't Eli. Jasper's gait was slower, familiar. This rider was heavier, impatient. She froze, clothespin still in her hand. Moments later, Sheriff Monroe rode into view, a broad man with a dusty badge and a mustache he trimmed too often. His eyes landed on Clara, sharp and assessing, and she felt the air tighten around her. "Afternoon, ma'am," he drawled. Clara nodded politely, though her pulse quickened. "Sheriff." He dismounted with the confidence of someone who believed the world belonged to him. "Eli around?" Before she could answer, the barn doors swung open and Eli stepped out, wiping dirt from his hands. His expression didn't change, but his shoulders did, just barely, just enough. "Monroe," he said. "Didn't expect to see you out this far." The sheriff walked toward him, spurs clinking. "Heard you got company." His gaze flicked back to Clara, lingering like a stain. Eli didn't flinch. "They're under my roof." "Yeah, that's what folks in town are saying." Monroe leaned on the fence, voice slow and oily. "Trouble is, some men have questions about that woman. Real important ones." Clara's grip tightened around the sheet in her hands. She felt exposed, as though the sheriff were peeling away the safety she'd found here. "What men?" Eli asked, though she suspected he already knew. "Representatives from Moore Mining," Monroe replied. "They rode in yesterday. Showed paperwork. Claimed she owes debt. Said she took off without settling it. That company kills men faster than it pays them," Eli said flatly. "You know it," Monroe shrugged. "Not my concern. My job's to keep order. And right now, order means cooperating with folks who sign checks." Clara's heart plunged. She stared at the ground, feeling the ghost of hunger return, not in her stomach, but in her bones, that helpless, hollow dread. Eli took a step forward, placing himself between her and the sheriff. "She's safe here." "Maybe," Monroe said, "but Moore's boys ain't the patient type. They'll come for her. And when they do, your ranch becomes a battleground." Clara looked up sharply. "I never wanted to bring trouble." "You didn't," Eli interrupted, eyes still on the sheriff. "Trouble chased you?" Monroe raised both hands as if innocent. "Just delivering a warning and a request." He met Clara's gaze. "If you care about the folks sheltering you, leave before they get hurt." Clara felt herself sway, not physically, but internally, like a tree splitting under old lightning strikes. Every fear she'd buried resurfaced. Eli's voice was quiet but dangerous. "She's not going anywhere." Monroe sighed like a man bored with righteousness. "Suit yourself. But if Moore Mining files charges, or if violence breaks out, law says I can't take your side." He tipped his hat. "Good luck. You'll need it." He mounted his horse and rode off, leaving dust, silence, and dread in his wake. Clara exhaled shakily, realizing she'd been holding her breath. "Eli, I can't stay. He's right. They'll destroy everything." Eli turned to her, eyes steady, unyielding. "Clara, look at this place." He gestured to the house, the barn, the fields. "This ranch survived storms, drought, lost me. It can survive men with empty souls." "That's not your fight," she whispered. "It is now," he said, "because I opened my door. Because your children sleep under my roof. Because decent people don't turn suffering into someone else's burden. And because you deserve protection, not punishment." Clara's throat tightened until she could barely breathe. No one had ever spoken of her that way, not with conviction, not with certainty. "But Eli, what if someone gets hurt?" He shook his head. "Someone already has. And I'm not letting it happen again." Behind them, Lillian Thomas played in the yard, chasing a barn cat, laughing, completely unaware of the storm building outside their borrowed shelter. Clara watched them, a mother's instinct and a survivor's guilt warring inside her. Peace had been a gift. But now Choice was a responsibility, and the world beyond the ranch was already coming for them. Clara barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Sheriff Monroe's expression, not angry, not concerned, just indifferent. The look of a man who would step aside and let wolves do their work. Before dawn, she slipped from the bed, careful not to wake Lily or Thomas curled beside her. She moved through the quiet house, her footsteps soft as confession. In the kitchen, she found paper, ink, and a trembling sense of resolve. She owed Eli more than words could contain, but she would try anyway. Outside, Eli was already awake, leaning against the corral fence, watching the sky lighten into pale gray. He didn't turn when she approached. He'd heard her coming. "You should be resting," he said gently. Clara swallowed. "I need to talk to you." His posture shifted, alert, bracing. "All right." She held out the folded note she'd written, short, apologetic, final. He stared at it but didn't take it. "What's this?" "Our goodbye," she forced out. "The children and I, we're leaving." Eli blinked slow, disbelieving. "Where?" "Anywhere that isn't here. We'll pack the wagon, head north, maybe find work in another town. If we keep moving, more mining won't catch us." "Clara," he said, voice roughened, "you can't outrun a corporation with 2 kids and no money." "I've outrun worse," she whispered. Eli finally turned to face her. The sunrise reflected in his eyes, orange, wounded. "You think leaving protects us. It doesn't. It just makes you vulnerable again." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. "I can't stay here knowing I might destroy everything you've built." "You didn't bring destruction," he said. "Greed did, but it followed me," she whispered. "And it'll keep following." Eli shook his head slowly, like a man refusing fate. "Clara, if you walk away, those men will find you on an empty road with 2 children and no shelter, no law, no allies. Here, you have a home. You have people who will fight for you." She looked up sharply. "You shouldn't have to fight for us. That's my choice," he replied. "Not yours to carry." A beat of silence passed long, heavy, full. Inside the barn, Miguel stepped out, having heard enough. "Señora," he said softly, "you leave, those men will hunt you like game. Here, at least, they'll face a wall instead of 3 starving souls." Clara's vision blurred. She hadn't wanted witnesses. She hadn't wanted kindness. Kindness made leaving harder. "I'm not worth this trouble," she said, voice cracking. Eli exhaled sharply. "Don't say that. Not ever." Clara's throat closed. She had spent months swallowing humiliation, silence, fear. Now tears rose without permission. "I've made nothing but mistakes," she said. "I keep losing everything." "Then let this be where you stop losing," Eli replied. The wind brushed through the pasture, carrying the smell of hay and winter. Somewhere near the porch, Lily's laughter rang out as she chased the gray barn cat. Thomas followed, stumbling, determined. Life continued unaware. Clara watched them, her heart aching with love and terror. "I just want them safe," she whispered. "And they are," Eli said. "Because they're here." She closed her eyes. "I don't want anyone hurt because of us. You think I haven't lived with hurt already?" His voice softened, not angry, but deeply honest. "Pain doesn't scare me anymore, Clara. Losing what matters does." The words hit her like a doorway opening. She looked at the house, the quilts she'd washed, the meals she'd cooked, the chairs scraped across the floor by children's feet. A place she never thought she'd deserve. "Stay," Eli said, not commanding, not pleading, inviting. "Let me stand with you, not out of pity, out of choice." Clara's hands trembled as she lowered the note she'd written. It fluttered to the dirt, useless now. "All right," she whispered. "We'll stay." Relief washed across Eli's face, not triumphant, but grateful. He nodded once, then turned toward the barn. "We'll reinforce the gates," he said. Miguel will ride into town quietly, see what he hears, and I'll speak to neighbors. Good men don't take kindly to bullies, Clara exhaled shakily. Eli, thank you. He paused, meeting her gaze with something steady, warm, and terrifying. You don't need to thank me. Just let us fight beside you. For the first time since Samuel died, Clara didn't feel like someone running. She felt like someone worth defending. 3 days passed, 3 long, watchful days. On the outside, life at the Carter Ranch looked unchanged. Cattle grazed, windmill blades turned. Children laughed in the yard. But beneath the surface, every adult moved like a coiled spring. Doors were kept locked. Lanterns stayed burning late into the night. And Eli carried his rifle the way other men carried a coat without thinking. Clara noticed how his eyes tracked every rider on the horizon, how Miguel checked fence lines twice instead of once, how the dogs bristled at unfamiliar scents. She wanted to help, but every time she opened her mouth, Lily or Thomas would run to her, asking for a story, a hug, reassurance. Their peace was fragile. She couldn't shatter it. Trouble finally arrived on a deceptively quiet afternoon. The sun was high, the air still, not even a breeze rustling through the pasture grass. Clara was shelling peas at the kitchen table, watching the children draw pictures on scraps of paper. She heard it before she saw it, the rhythmic thunder of approaching hooves. Not one horse. Not 2. Several. Her heart lurched. Lily, Thomas, she said gently, masking her fear. Go upstairs and play in the room, all right? They obeyed without question, used to listening when their mother's voice turned carefully calm. Clara waited until she heard the bedroom door close, then moved to the window. 5 riders emerged over the ridged dark coats, polished boots, smug posture. Hired men, not ranchers. In the lead rode a tall man with a gold-tipped cane strapped to where a rifle should be. His grin was the kind Clara had seen in nightmares, too confident, too practiced. More mining had found them. Clara's stomach twisted. She backed away from the glass and rushed outside. Ellie was already approaching from the barn, rifle in hand, expression unreadable. Miguel stood beside him, jaw tight, pistol holstered, but ready. The ranch dogs positioned themselves at Eli's feet, hackles raised. The riders didn't slow. Dust billowed beneath their horses' hooves as they reached the gate. The lead man reined in dramatically, surveying the ranch as if evaluating property he already owned. Well now, he drawled, voice slick as oil, this must be the famous Carter spread. Eli didn't respond. Silence, Clara realized, was his weapon of choice. The man clicked his tongue. Name's Barrett Moore. My father owns Moore Mining. We've come to collect what's ours, Miguel snorted. Funny. Don't see anything here that belongs to you. Barrett's grin sharpened. Don't play dumb, son. That woman you're hiding Clara Hale, she stole from us. Clara stepped forward before Eli could stop her. I stole nothing. You fabricated debt. You threatened my family. Barrett's eyes slid over her, slow and invasive. You vanished in the night, Mrs. Hawley, with company property, no less a wagon, tools, supplies. That's theft. That was my husband's, Clara snapped. His pay earned with his life, Barrett shrugged, unimpressed. Grief makes people confused. Documents say otherwise. And documents, he tapped his cane, are what the law obeys. Eli stepped in front of Clara. You're not taking her. Barrett chuckled. I wasn't asking, he nodded to his men. Search the property. Bring her out. No one moved. Because standing behind Eli now were 3 more figures neighboring ranchers, men Clara recognized from passing visits. Hank Wallace, big as a barn door. Reverend Tate, quiet but fierce. And Rosa Delgado, who ran cattle alone and feared no one. Each carried a weapon. Each looked ready. Barrett blinked, thrown off. Didn't realize you'd turn this into a charity ward, Carter. Eli's voice was steady steel. It's a community. Something your company doesn't understand. Barrett's smile evaporated. You're making a dangerous choice. No, Eli said. You did when you hunted a widow instead of helping her. Barrett's men shifted uneasily. Guns or not, they hadn't expected a wall of locals blocking their path. Ranchers didn't side with corporations. They sided with each other. Then, from behind, another horse approached Sheriff Monroe. Clara's heart plummeted until she saw his expression. Gone was the smug neutrality. He looked cornered. More, Monroe called out. You and your men need to leave. Barrett spun. Sheriff, do your damn job? Monroe swallowed. I checked the documents. That debt isn't legally binding. Your father forged signatures. Court will toss it. Barrett stiffened. Rage replaced arrogance. You'll regret. No, Monroe said, voice surprisingly firm. You will, if you don't ride out now. Silence stretched tight as wire. Finally, Barrett jerked his reins. This isn't over. He turned, spurring his horse into retreat. His men followed, but not quickly. They looked back, memorizing the ranch, the people, the defiance. When the dust settled, Clara realized she was shaking. Eli turned to her, not triumphant, not proud, just relieved. You all right? Clara nodded, breath unsteady. They'll come back. Yes, Eli said. But so will we. And for the first time in months, Clara believed it not because danger disappeared, but because she wasn't facing it alone anymore. March arrived with a kindness winter never offered, grass greening at the edges, calves wobbling to their feet, sunlight warming the porch steps. Clara found herself humming when she swept, laughing when Lily braided flowers into her hair, smiling when Eli entered a room. She didn't notice the change, not at first, but everyone else did. Miguel teased Eli about it. Lily whispered to Thomas that Mama was glowing again. Even Jasper, Eli's horse, seemed to nudge Clara with affectionate approval. Life, after so much hunger and fear, tasted sweet, until the stagecoach rolled into town. L.A. had ridden in to pick up supplies and return a borrowed branding iron. A simple errand, a quiet afternoon. But when he stepped off the wagon outside the general store, Mr. Talbot, the postmaster, rushed toward him, waving a sealed envelope like it carried dynamite. Been holding this months, Talbot said. Didn't know where to send it? Eli's stomach tightened. His name was written on the front, but not in ink he recognized. The paper was stiff, the handwriting sharp and practiced. He didn't open it until he was back in the wagon, away from curious eyes. Inside was a single sheet. Mr. Eli Mackenzie, I write to inform you that Clara Thompson and her children are not without claims. A relative has stepped forward, her late husband's brother seeking guardianship. He intends to travel to collect them, prepare them for departure. Respectfully, Sheriff Jonah Keller Eli. Read it twice. Then again, the words didn't soften. They didn't change. Thomas's uncle Clara had mentioned him only once, with dread tightening her voice. A man Samuel had cut ties with. A man who believed children were property and wives' obligations. Eli felt his pulse hammer in his neck. He pictured Clara smiling in the garden, Thomas racing Jasper along the fence, Lily learning to sew in Anna's old rocking chair. He pictured their suitcases packed, their footsteps fading, the house growing quiet again, hollow, like before Clara arrived. By the time Eli reached the ranch, dust streaked his boots and his hands shook on the reins. Clara was outside hanging laundry, cheeks flushed from sunlight, hair pinned loosely beneath her bonnet. When she saw him, she waved soft, familiar, entirely his without realizing it. Eli didn't wave back, she noticed. Her smile faltered. What happened? He handed her the letter, unable to speak. Clara unfolded it slowly, as if afraid it might break. With every line she read, her breath shallowed. By the end, she was trembling. No, she whispered. He can't. He never even visited when Samuel died. He didn't want us then. But he wants you now, Eli said, voice rough. Or wants what you represent Samuel's land, his name, maybe the pension you mentioned. Clara shook her head hard, tears stinging. Eli, I just found a place. My kids just stopped waking up screaming. Her voice cracked. We can't go. I won't survive starting over again. Eli closed the distance between them, not touching, but close enough she could feel his steadiness. You're not going anywhere without a fight. I promise you that. Clara swallowed, desperate, afraid to believe him. What if we lose? He held her gaze firm, unwavering. Then we lose together. That word together nearly brought her to her knees. For months, Clara had packed her life in silence, prepared to leave before anyone asked her to. But now she wasn't the only one holding on. Someone else, someone good, someone solid was willing to stand in front of her instead of behind. The wind picked up, snapping the laundry on the line. Thomas and Lily came running from the barn, breathless and smiling, unaware that their world had just shifted. Clara folded the letter against her chest, heart pounding. Everything she loved, everything she'd rebuilt, was suddenly at risk. And the man trying to take it didn't even know he'd already lost. The tension lingered in the Carter house like a shadow that refused to leave, but life at the ranch refused to pause. Morning chores, meals, and lessons with the children went on as if the threat of Clara's so-called relative were nothing more than a breeze rustling through the barn. Yet in the quiet moments over breakfast, in the kitchen, or while repairing fences, Clara felt it pressing against her, the unspoken fear that their peace was fragile, temporary. Eli seemed different, too. He didn't speak much about the letter, yet his presence was heavier, more watchful. He moved with a patience that was almost frightening, eyes constantly scanning, jaw set in lines of determination. Clara had come to understand him in ways she didn't fully understand herself. Strength wrapped in careful thought. A man who bore responsibility like armor and warmth like a secret. One evening, after a long day of chores, Clara set the table for dinner, brushing flour from her hands as Lily. And Thomas scurried around, placing small plates and silverware with the importance of little people performing grand duties. Eli watched silently from the doorway, his boots leaving faint dust prints across the wooden floor. Something about the way he looked quietly present, steady, unyielding made Clara feel both exposed and safe at the same time. She served the bread first, tearing off thick slices and placing them in the center of the table. The children dug in immediately, slathering it with butter and jam. But Clara noticed something in their behavior: confidence, a sense of belonging. She glanced at Eli. He had been sitting quietly, watching, but now he reached over, offering a slice to her, a small, simple gesture that carried more than nourishment. "Here," he said. "You've earned it." His voice was soft, but it carried a weight Clara couldn't ignore. She accepted it, feeling the warmth not just from the bread, but from the gesture itself. She hesitated, then asked, "Eli, why?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked past her to the children, who were laughing over a spilled cup of milk. Then, finally, he said, "Because family isn't just about blood. It's about who sits at your table, who shares your bread. And right now, you and the children belong here." Clara's throat tightened. She wasn't used to such words or such certainty. Every step she had taken since Samuel's death had been measured, guarded, cautious. She had believed that independence was survival, that relying on anyone else was dangerous. And yet, sitting across from Eli, seeing his quiet assertion that they had a place here, she realized that survival alone had never been enough. What mattered now was connection, safety, belonging. Then something happened, small, almost accidental, but unforgettable. Lily, giggling at a joke Thomas had made, suddenly said, "Pa, can you pass the butter?" Clara froze, her spoon hovering mid-air. Eli looked at her, eyes wide, expression unreadable. Did she just— Yes, Clara whispered, heart hammering. She called you. Pa? The room fell silent for a moment. Eli's gaze softened, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He didn't correct her. Instead, he passed the butter, lifting Lily's spirits and letting her believe she had spoken truth. The unspoken acknowledgment between him and Clara carried more weight than any declaration. It was an affirmation. They were more than refuge. They were family. Clara set down her spoon, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at Eli, searching for words she didn't yet have. I never thought. You don't have to say it, he replied, voice steady. Just know that you belong. You all belong. And I'll make sure of it. The children resumed eating, unaware of the monumental shift that had just occurred. But Clara could feel it, a warm certainty that hummed beneath her ribs. In that simple act, sharing bread, sharing a name, sharing a table, they had crossed a threshold. They had gone from surviving to living, from strangers to a family. And in that moment, Clara realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. She didn't just want to stay. She wanted to belong, not out of need, not out of fear, but because this table, this bread, this man who had quietly offered his life alongside hers was home. The sun had just begun its slow descent, painting the ranch in golds and ambers, when Eli and Clara stood outside the farmhouse, watching Lily and Thomas chase Jasper across the pasture. Their laughter echoed through the crisp evening air, mingling with the distant calls of cattle and the soft rustle of wind through the prairie grass. For a moment, the world felt impossibly peaceful, almost fragile in its perfection. Clara breathed deeply, letting the scent of hay, earth, and warm timber fill her senses. She had thought she knew what hunger was, days spent scavenging, nights spent shivering under threadbare blankets, but now she understood. Another kind of emptiness, the one that comes from not belonging, from wandering through life without a place to call home. And for the first time in years, that emptiness was gone. Eli stood a few paces behind her, silent, watching her watch the children. She could feel his presence steady, unwavering, and for the first time, she allowed herself to relax fully. She had come to trust him, not only with her life but with her heart. And yet, a whisper of fear lingered at the edge of her mind. She had survived so much loss. What if happiness, too, was temporary? Eli cleared his throat, a gentle sound that pulled her attention from the horizon. She turned to him, and he met her gaze with an intensity that made her heart skip. He was quiet for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully, then stepped closer. Clara, he began, his voice soft but unwavering, these past months, you and the children, you've brought life back to this ranch. You've brought laughter, warmth, hope, and you've done it not as a burden, not as a stranger, but as family. Clara swallowed, her pulse quickening. I didn't know I could ever belong anywhere again, she admitted, voice trembling. I didn't think anyone could ever care enough to stand by us, to fight for us. Eli's eyes softened, the weight of his own past loss reflected in his gaze. I do. I want to stand by you, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because I choose to, because you and these children, you're mine now, if you'll have me. Clara's hands trembled as she took his, feeling warmth and strength radiate from him. Her eyes filled with tears, not from sorrow but from relief, from a hope she had almost forgotten she could feel. She opened her mouth, words failing, and he smiled gently, understanding without needing more. Then, with a quiet but resolute voice, Eli said something that made her heart stop. Clara Hulla, will you take my name? The question hung in the air, simple yet monumental. It was not a proposal born of obligation or tradition. It was a promise of protection, commitment, and belonging. It was a statement that she and her children would be more than just visitors in his life. They would be entwined, forever part of his world, his family, his legacy. Clara's tears spilled freely, a mix of joy, disbelief, and relief. She took a deep breath, looked at Lily and Thomas playing at the edge of the pasture, then back at Eli. Her voice was steady now, filled with all the courage she had summoned over the years. Yes. Yes, Eli, we will. He drew her close, wrapping his arms around her and holding her as if letting go was impossible. In that embrace, the past, the fear, the hunger, the loss fell away. In its place rose something stronger: trust, love, and the certainty that they had found home in each other. The children ran toward them, laughing, oblivious to the magnitude of the moment. Eli bent to scoop Thomas into his arms, while Clara twirled Lily into a tight hug. The ranch seemed to exhale, the wind carrying away the last remnants of fear and sorrow. Clara whispered into Eli's ear, her heart light, "We finally have a place. A family." Eli kissed her forehead, steady and sure. "And you have my name, forever." In that moment, the ranch was no longer just a place of survival, it was a sanctuary. The widow who had once whispered of hunger, who had feared she brought only trouble wherever she went, now walked into a future filled with warmth, laughter, and love. And she carried with her not just bread and shelter, but the most powerful gift of all: a name, a home, and a family to call her own. The Carter Ranch would never be empty again.